Did you know that 63% of US adults have had an adverse childhood experience? Today, we're diving into how these adverse childhood experiences show up and keep us stuck in our adult lives. Hi, welcome back. I'm Violet Rainwater, the host of The Awakening Show. And today I am so freaking pumped, friends, because today I am interviewing Dr. McFadden. She is a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist, and she specializes in women's health and hormonal health. And I asked her to jump in here with me to dive into a lot of the questions that I have about childhood trauma, specifically about how physical abuse in childhood shows up in our adult lives. And so, Dr. McFadden, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so delighted to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, I am so excited. I have so many questions that I've had throughout my healing journey because I think physical abuse is a different type of experience altogether. And it has held me back in a lot of ways in my career and in relationships, in ways that I was conscious of, but in a lot of ways that I was not conscious of. So I'm really excited to dive in. But before we do, can you just share a little bit about you and your practice and what you help people with?
Yeah, sure. So I am a psychiatrist and I'm a physician. I started out, my dad's a psychiatrist, so I followed in his footsteps. And he thought what he did was so interesting and he loved it. So I was like, oh, I want to love my work. I learned so much. I learned so much from every patient, and every situation just keeps teaching me more and more. And I try to help patients through PTSD. I work part time at the VA, so I work with veterans who come back from war and are having trauma responses or depression or struggling with their military experience. And I also work with women. I have a women's program where I guide women through a holistic approach to their mental health. So I work with hormones, I work with nutrition, we do somatic regulation, somatic therapy. We also do nervous system regulation. And
Mm.
once these women know that they can actually have an impact on their health just by changing their lifestyle, they love it. And I love it too because we don't have to prescribe meds every month and we get to actually like change our health from the bottom up. So
I love
people
that.
feel so much better with it. And I've been doing these practices and learning ever since I graduated. I still keep learning. So I have a neuroscience training, so I like to bring in the physiology and the neurons and how they work and where they're operating to give us like a visual of what's happening in the body as well. And I think that that really helps when we try to understand what the heck is going on in this confusing body of ours at times.
Yeah, well, awareness is key. And you had me at nervous system regulation because that was something that I never knew about pretty much throughout my career. And had I understood that my nervous system was dysregulated on most days and how to regulate it, it would have changed everything. But today I want to start and I want to get right to it. Like, I don't want to hold back. I want to go in and just ask um, from your research, from your experience with your clients, when a child has had physical abuse, and specifically when a woman has had physical abuse and at the hands of, whether it was her mother or her father, how that affects them when they're adults. And I want to I have so many questions, so I'm just going to let you start sharing what you have seen, and then I will ask away from there.
Yeah. So it's different with every person, but what we know that's happening is that in those early childhood experience, the brain is still developing. So there are different parts that are maturing. Especially when you're young, you really actually don't have your full capacity. So your adult, your parents are kind of taking over for that planning, that executive functioning, that higher order processing. So you're really kind of like a little parasite, like just living off of them. If there's trauma, then there's an association with your caregivers and safety with also the abuse. So in our mind, often we can couple, say like, oh, we're only safe, but we're getting hurt. And these things can kind of come together as the mind is developing. that can have an impact later on, and we'll talk about it. But the amygdala is the fear center of the brain. It's a very primitive part. It's an early developmental part of the brain, and it's right in here. And it's on both sides. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that protects us when something bad is happening, right? So it's actually faster than our vision. The
Wow.
amygdala operates faster than our vision. So if something is like coming at us, we don't need to see it to have a reaction to it. We actually
Wow.
will react to it before we even see it. So there's a lot of systems set up to protect us. And the amygdala has a lot of very important features. So when we are physically hurt when we're young, our amygdala is operating at a very strong way. And all those neurons that get fired in that time of the amygdala is on, those are going to be very strong because it's survival. So those neurons are survival and they are operating. So the sympathetic nervous system turns on, our heart starts to increase, our focus starts to go just on the thing that we need to focus on, nothing else. And our system will only go into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode. Now, the nervous system operates with the sympathetic fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Basically means you're going to fight back, you're going to run away, you're going to freeze and not move and play dead, or you're going to compliment and try to make that person feel. Now, that's a little bit more advanced. That happens like later on when you've got more social graces.
Sure.
But when you're young, a lot of times crying, um, being quiet, and being out of sight, out of mind, or being very aggressive too. All of these reactions can be larger. And when the people who are supposed to keep you safe are hurting you, there is no distinction between safety and pain. They're
Mm.
together, which makes it very hard to know in anyone else around you who will be safe or
Right.
who will inflict pain. So the way that you see the world is that those two can always come together almost in anyone. And
Wow.
so over time, right, as the child starts to develop this autonomy, which happens in teenage years and early adult, that difference, that separation, that autonomy, then you start to realize, oh, that's not okay. Oh, this isn't what I choose. Oh, I'm different than my parent figure. And those choices start to get being made as you start to become more financially independent and less dependent and emotionally independent. But when you're young, it can be really volatile. And sometimes kids will have a lot of tantrums. Sometimes they'll be quiet and not be present. So there are these extremes that are happening. But oftentimes you can see in the child's behavior this, they'll go up to anyone. It doesn't matter. They're not maybe not afraid of anyone, and they'll just say anything to anyone because there's no difference between safety and pain. The
Wow.
kids might also be the extreme opposite, which is they won't talk to anyone because they won't trust anyone because the people who are the most close to them hurt them. How could they trust anyone else?
Mm.
So there's this it's kind of these extremes in behaviors that you see because the amygdala is a survival part of the
Yeah.
brain. And so these kids are often feeling like it's life or death a lot of
Yeah.
the time.
That's what it felt like. It very much. And the reason I know is because my experience with that, and for a long time, I just thought, because we're Russian, it's corporal punch, like that's just the way things were. And I didn't see it for how damaging it was for me as a girl to experience that and how it held me back in so many ways. But piggyback piggyback on what you just said, for me, it affected me in taking risk and trying new things because I had such grave performance anxiety. Like it wasn't just I failed and I'm going to pick myself up again and try again. It was life or death. Failure
Mm.
meant death. It meant another beating, which I would have rather died than experience, as a child. And I remember learning early on. I remember, and like when I knew the beating was coming and like few moments, but I learned early on to just check out, to disassociate. And I didn't know I was disassociating, but looking back, because I remember like looking like I was out of my body, looking down at what was happening. So I wasn't present. But that disassociation at 4 years old, 5 years old, six, like it was chronic, it was chronic because my father was under tremendous stress and he didn't have any tools to manage his stress and his childhood trauma as a child Holocaust survivor. And so that rage spilled into our family, not having tools, not having awareness. And so I really remember that for me, any time that I would need to try something new, this wave of like fear would come, and it was crippling. And then I would just disassociate and start the downward spiral, right? And so I would self-sabotage because part of growth, as you know, part of growing a business is making mistakes, right? And
Mhm.
I was too afraid to make those mistakes. And so that's like the biggest way that I feel it held me back is that performance anxiety and having grave fear to try things that I probably would fail at because I was new to it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of times they say secure attachment allows kids to go and adventure, and then they come back and they know that they're safe, and then they go adventure a little more, and then they come back and then they try something different, but they know that their parents are there, they've got their back, they're going to be able to be soothed, right? Because they can't soothe themselves at that age. Let's go try a little more and come back to that safety, right? But if you've got this trying and then the punishment, the trying and the punishment, the trying and the punishment, then you're not going to try
Right.
because it's going to be
Wow.
punishment.
Wow. Because it's paralyzing, right? Like it's literally like even though like it might be something small that I'm trying and no big deal if I fail, the emotion that was behind, failing or the emotion of like even the anticipation of failing, it was like a tidal wave. It would take me completely under. And I often wonder if the reason that it was so deep for me is because a lot of it was performance based. So some of the abuse that I experienced was because I didn't have good grades or I didn't know the right answer,
Hmm.
right? And so if I don't have good grades, like if I don't perform, if I don't, then I'm not worthy, then it's life or death. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Do you think that if it's based on things like performance, like I had to perform at an excellent level to even sat, which I could never reach, right? So I could never hit that any goal that I had or anything that I wanted, it was never enough, right? And so more often than not, I made the mistake or I didn't make him happy or whatever it was. And so I'm curious, do you find that when kids are punished in corporal punishment due to grades and things like that, that it really affects their performance anxiety as adults?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it makes a lot of sense that there might be this standard. Oftentimes, parents want their kids to do better than they did. They have this level of like, I'm teaching you and training you to have a better life than I had. And I need you to have a better life because it means that all these sacrifices I made are worth it. And that's actually a very like self realizing self, if it, like I don't know the word, but it's kind of an egoic thing. It's like, oh, I did it right, I made all these sacrifices, I did all these things, and now my kids are now
I
having
think
it
it's a
better
bit
and they must
narcissistic,
be
right?
better.
Like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
narcissist. Yeah.
they must be better for me to
Yeah.
feel good, right? It's codependent. They must do well for me to feel good instead of observing and witnessing your children in their life and being curious about it and saying, oh, I wonder what that's like for them. And I wonder, oh, wonder why they're feeling this. And oh, what do you need here? And being supportive. Hey, is there anything you need? No? Okay, good. Go off and do this thing. And so there's a very different thing when there's kind of like a hook on it. There's like a need, there's like an essential part, an expectation in order for that parent to be happy. And that's a slippery slope because in order to make your parents happy, you must do this. That is a not really allowing that person to grow into who they are.
Yeah.
And it's very controlling and it can cause a lot of problems. At some point there's the rebellion, right? There's that I am who I am, you can't control me. And that often comes up in teenage years, generally speaking, but it could be later, where there's this like, I'm doing what I want. And it can be an actual powerful developmental stage whenever that happens, if it happens in teenage or younger, that separation, that rejection of the parent, that identity move, right? It can be from a traumatic experience, but it can be this catalyst that really allows for resiliency to
Mm,
happen later. So it's not all bad, it's not all for naught, it's not doesn't always lead to problems forever. And you are a testament to that, right? This level of awareness that you've gotten, that separation, that observing and looking in and seeing, okay, wow, this is what's going on, and being able to face stuff with that autonomy.
right, right. Wow. And, you know, one of the key skills that I think that's missing, and you mentioned this, like the child doesn't get an opportunity to really grow into who they are born to
Mhm.
be. One of the things that I feel that I was missing for a long time was I didn't know how to be authentic because I didn't know who I was, right? Like I didn't know how to feel safe in my body. So I
Mhm.
disassociated most of the time. And I would often get lost. I've always been fascinated with human development. And I would often get lost in the people that were around me that I thought were successful, and I would study them. And so in grade school, it was the popular girls, the American girls. I was a Russian immigrant and I just wanted to be like the American girls. And so I spent so much time studying other people and then emulating how they are because I thought that's what was missing for me. I thought if I just did what they did, then I too would have a happy home and be a good girl and daddy wouldn't have to hit me and all these things. But what it actually did was take me further from my
Mhm.
true self because I just became so programmed to do what I thought other people found appropriate or to make other like that people pleasing, right? Because I wanted them to accept me. I wanted to impress them so that I could feel worthy. I could feel good about myself. But in that, I lost my authentic self.
Mhm.
So I ask this all the time. Why do you think that childhood trauma survivors, especially if they survive physical abuse, and it often comes with mental and emotional abuse, right? Which I also had. Why do you think it's so hard for them to be authentic, to be seen, to show up on social media and, share their gift and share their light? It's a big struggle. And I'd love to know from your professional opinion why that is. And more importantly, what can we do about it?
Yeah. One of the cornerstones of therapy and coaching is this, and parenting is this: I see you. I see you. And you have people say, like, hey, I see you. I feel you.
I love
I
that.
get you. I get it. Good.
Validation.
The reflection of yourself to you.
Mm,
Because when you
wow.
get yourself reflected to you, right, then you can be yourself.
Wow, I love that. That's so beautiful. Imagine if all leaders in organizations did a reflection of yourself back to you. Is there a name for that? Like what you just described? Is there a technique?
Yeah. So when little kids are born, what happens innately is this mirroring, right? The baby's like, ah, and the parents are like, ah, and you're mirroring each other. The baby's like, ah, and you do faces, you mirror, you see, I see you. There's this like play happening, but it's a lot of developmental programming that is mirroring, that's saying, hey, I see you. You're crying. Hey, I'm tending to you. Hey, you're happy. I'm going to smile and mirror you. It's happening all the time, happening all the time. And there are moments where it can't happen, right? Someone's distracted, right? And it doesn't need to be all the time, but a certain percentage of the time allows for really healthy development and secure attachment. If you are not getting mirrored and that there's more discord, and more anti what you feel and not being seen, right? Not being understood, not being really honored, and not being respected as you get older, right? Then there's this like, I'm different, I'm wrong, shame hole. And that becomes part of your identity because you're not getting the mirror. I see you, I feel you, I get you, you know? And that can, you know, there's still consequences. Hey, I see you. I get why you did that. It's not okay to do that though in this household. And like, it's time to be, you have to go to your room for an hour and then we can talk about it. You know, like punishment can still happen,
Yeah.
standards can still happen. And they're important to hold people accountable so that they know, hey, if I do this, there's a bad thing that can happen. But it's really with an understanding of like, oh, like you're human and of course you're angry and anger is okay and you're not allowed to push Billy. So we're going to do this because that's not okay because then you hurt Billy and hurting other people isn't good. But once you go and stay in the room for an hour, let's talk. And they're all, we can discuss what punishment is, but let's talk and see like, how do you manage that anger? Like when you get angry, what do? Let's have a safe word. Let's have a thing that's safe and healthy, right? So that you teach kids that it's okay to be angry and it's not okay to push. You know, it's okay to have this feeling. I see you, I get it, I understand. Yes, yes. And let's do the thing that's going to be good for you and Billy, you know, teaching that. So, this reflection, the mirroring, it happens early in childhood, it happens all the time with all of us. You know, how much are you mirroring these people that you're talking to with you and me here, even? How much are we mirroring? We get it. I know when you get what I'm talking about, I could tell. You're like clicking into it, right? And that's saying, like, hey, I see you, I hear you, I get what you're saying, you get what I'm saying. This happens all the time. And when we have those places of breaks of this, people don't get it. They don't understand there's anger, there's aggression, there's like violence, right? Those become scary and the body can shut down.
Yeah.
So the reflection is the key. And the really supportive environments have that.
And so, what if you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner or you work for an organization and you want to get out there in a bigger way, you want to share in a bigger way, but yet have this block from having these experiences, adverse experiences in childhood that don't allow you to see yourself as you truly are, right? We tend to see ourselves as flawed, especially if we're trying new things and, putting things out there for the world to see. But what would be something that we could do that if, to build that courage and show up in the most authentic way possible?
There are a number of different things. One is creating a group, a cohort, like a sisterhood or sisters or friends, or, you know, like where people see each other and they're all conscious in this process, you know, where they're rooting each other on, they're cheering each other on, you know, a bunch of women, business group people in one area, just like really seeing each other, honoring, reflecting, you know, this, going through those processes with each other can be really amazing. And I've been in groups where that's happened and it's allowed me to really, you know, spread my wings and do things that I wouldn't have done otherwise. And same with family. You know, if there's family that can do that, finding really culturing and nurturing those relationships with certain family members, close or extended, that do have this like, oh, I get it, I see you. Um, Therapists will do a lot of reflecting because and a lot of reviewing, you know, and they see patterns and identify patterns. I would say coaching is probably the strongest one in this. They actually have a lot of training to create that supportive environment, that encouraging environment for actually achieving goals. And so that reflection is a really strong part of coaching.
Mhm.
Um, any somatic therapy would also really honor and validate the experience of the body and the mind. And so that can be very, very nurturing. And I've known people who have had a lot of childhood trauma and they do the Hakomi method, or they do somatic therapy, and just getting cared for and nurtured, the physical body experience. You know, it's not just talking, it's like you are feeling in your whole body all the things that you needed to feel when you were growing up, and it is just solidifying in your nervous system. That is going to change you. It's going to change so many things and it's going to change your whole system. So those are the ways.
I love that. And you said Hakomi method. I've never heard of that. So I'd love to know what that is. But also, I'd love for us to do one of your somatic body techniques, tools. So that way our viewers have something like they can actually use today if they're triggered. Because I think that's what it is, as a survivor of childhood trauma, physical, mental, emotional. I found myself triggered pretty much all the time in my work day, and I didn't even know it, because I just ran on anxiety. That was all that I knew. And so I find that when someone just can give us a tool, it's like a lifeline, it's like we're drowning in the water and someone sends us, throws us one of those, what are they, lifeboats? What are those round things? I don't even know
Hmm.
what they're called, but
Lifesaver.
lifesavers. Yeah. So can you share a lifesaver and talk about, is it the Hakomi method?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do a guided, let's do a guided
Let's
somatic
do it.
experience.
Yes.
So, usually the way we start is dropping into a parasympathetic. So, it's that rest, that digest, that safe spot. So, we drop into that parasympathetic experience, and there are a couple ways to do it. We'll start off by closing your eyes, taking a big deep breath in, and as you breathe in, really pressing your abdomen out so you're expanding your diaphragm. And you slowly release the breath. Again, big deep breath in, pressing your abdomen out so you're really expanding that whole diaphragm. Slow release. Continue with that breath. And then just grab the ears, kind of like tucked in the hard part of the cartilage here. Grabbing your ears and pulling down and out. Maybe rubbing or moving. And just notice what happens as you move your ears around. You might notice your jaw loosens, your stomach starts to relax. You might notice some muscles relaxing. Some people cry. It's like this somatic release. If you're yawning or burping, those are also signs that your parasympathetic is on. And now dropping into your body, noticing any sensations you have that might be tension, tightness, anxiety, fear. Just doing a body scan from your head to your toes. A lot of these places are in the stomach, the chest, the neck, the head. Just doing the scan, noticing, is there any spot in my body that feels a little tight, tense, feels like I'm holding some fear, holding a memory. As you scan that, let that feeling get a little bit stronger. It's kind of like putting your focus, your attention on it, allowing those neurons to fire a little louder. We're so good at dampening, ignoring, distracting, dissociating, running away from this. We're actually doing the opposite. We're leaning in, we're taking care, we're nurturing, we're honoring. We're saying it's okay that this is here. Thank you, body, for telling me. Thank you for showing me. Thank you for feeling this. You are okay to feel this. And allowing that to get stronger and stronger, just as strong as you can, as strong as it needs to be here. Whenever it reaches that peak sensation, hang at that peak sensation whenever it gets there. Now, just be in the inquiry, where have I felt this before? Has there been a time in the past that this feeling has been here? If you remember that moment, just thinking, what did you need in that moment instead of what happened? Did you need something from a loved one, a caregiver, a parent? Can you imagine it? If you can't, do you need something from yourself as an adult coming in and giving you what you need? Just imagining what you need and giving it to yourself. Now, just noticing what it feels like. Is it challenging to give yourself? If you opened your nervous system to receive everything you needed from this situation, from this moment, getting all the support from yourself, from anyone who you need to bring in. Notice any shifts in your body over time. And whenever you're ready, you can bring yourself back to the room.
That was so nice. Now I'm ready for a nap.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Sometimes we hold a lot of stuff in our bodies without knowing it, right? The dissociation can keep us far from some of it. And they can be little things, but they're actually kind of big in our nervous system. So that's why we want to give it space to be louder, to let those neurons fire a little stronger. Neurons that fire, they often fire, and when they reach a peak, they actually resensitize so that they actually reach that peak and then need to go into a refractory period. So that nervous system regulation is saying, hey, I'm going to get this message of what my nervous system is telling me. Like, pay attention, and then I'm going to regulate. And
Wow.
so that can happen on our own.
And I think that's why guided meditation has been transformational for me. It was about 8 years ago, I started a daily practice, and I had never done meditation before. And I can honestly say it has rewired me. I mean, like I said, I'm, not healed. I don't claim to be healed. I'm on my journey and I've come a long way. But meditation is one of those tools that I respond to really well, especially if it's guided. And I think because, to your point, neurons that fire together wire together. And I never knew what it was like to be peaceful and activate the parasympathetic. And so, as I did it on a daily basis and started my day by connecting to the parasympathetic side of me, I was able to stay in that peaceful state. much
Mm.
more than if I didn't meditate. So that was lovely. Thank you so much, Dr. McFadden. And I would love to know, how can people work with you? Because I know you're taking patients, at least I think. Are you still taking patients? Okay. So share with us how people can find you. What is the best way for people to reach out if they want to work with you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's www.willowmindhealth.com, WILLOW, mindhealth.com. I'm also on Instagram, Whitney McFadden, MD. Send me a message. My email, drwhitney at willowmindhealth.com. And those are the best ways. So please reach out. I have programs, I have holistic wellness. I'm doing a lot of fun things. I have a lot of free events too for people who want to have touch points and see, okay, let me try this and see what it's like. So, yeah,
Well,
I'm
this
happy to
was
be of service.
awesome. And you have such a soothing vibe to you. Like, I just want to have you read me bedtime stories before I fall asleep. I'm sure people have told you that before. Like,
My parents taught me that.
you're very soothing, which it is a very safe place for us childhood trauma survivors. And so
Hmm.
I thank you. I thank you for your time today. I'd love to have you back on the show as I explore and I have more questions. I'd love to use you as a resource. And I just want to thank you for the gift that you're sharing in the world, being someone who lived in the darkness for a long time. And I feel like I've, you know, transformed and gotten to the light of it. Anyone that assists in that journey from darkness to light, I am a fan of. And so I thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Violet. I appreciate you. And I'm so happy that you have done this work and that you are sharing it and letting people hear your story. And it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you
Oh,
for
thank you
all
so
this.
much. And thank you, everyone who's watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up and hit the bell, subscribe so you never have to miss another episode. And we'll be back next week with another episode of The Awakening Show.